how people joke with each other in, let's say, Latin America is much different to how they do so in the US. Like the jokes are different, the language is different. There'll be like apartment complexes off campus. So in my case, I'm living in an apartment complex off campus because it's cheaper than the dorms.
How did you make friends in a new country? It was difficult for you? Do you went to this university with already friends, or did you start at zero?
Oh no, I started at zero. It was hard because especially for a big university like this one, this is one of those universities that you will go to class, you will pass by around of a lot of people whose faces you will never see again.
Hi, welcome back to Beyond Borders, a podcast that will give you tips and share experiences of what the real process of applying to university is. I'm your host, Miranda Montoy, and I am glad to be here one more episode. In this episode, I have the honor to interview Miranda Jiménez, a daughter of two Peruvians that was actually born in Mexico, where she lived a very big part of her life, also in Colombia, and finally in the US. She's now a student in Texas A&M, a university with a big prestige that give her a scholarship of about 80% of the career, but she was also accepted to Stanford and Berkeley. Miranda played tennis a big part of her life, a sport that she was outstanding at, and won a lot of competitions. Later on, this made her striking for a lot of universities that offer her different sports scholarships.
What inspired you to study abroad?
Well, rather than inspired, it was already kind of like a set path for me in the first place, since I was abroad for a really long time, before college. So it was more like a natural course rather than I want to go here, if that makes sense.
Why did you choose this university in particular?
I chose the university I went to in particular entirely out of cost efficiency, since at the time while I was applying, I was still not a permanent resident, much less citizen. So college tuition costs would have been a lot more expensive. And the university I'm going to right now just gave me a lot of scholarships that allowed me to pay for it.
What can you tell us about the university you choose?
The university I chose is Texas A&M. It is located in College Station, so it's around an hour and a half north from Houston. The city is entirely just the university itself, plus little towns surrounding it. The curriculums themselves, a lot of the engineering ones are some of the best in the nation. For other humanities, they're also really good. They have the largest campus in the US, which is kind of insane, to be honest. It's a really nicely organized university, so I like going there.
What can you tell us about the career path that you choose, and what's been the most challenging part of the career?
I chose economics as a major simply out of interest and curiosity, because when I took economics in school, I actually really liked it, even though I wasn't very good at it. So going into college, I was expecting it to be just as hard, if not harder. But for me, really, since a lot of the concepts were already given to me in school, it was more like a review, if not expanding mainly on what I saw. And my university in particular also offers a fast track program for the master's, which is what I'm doing right now. And honestly, that's probably the hardest thing I've been doing. Because the bachelor itself is not terribly hard if you know how to organize yourself. The master's program is a completely different thing, since you're on basically graduate level courses, and also you have your graduate thesis and capstone project.
How was your first year abroad? Any surprising or challenging moments?
My first year abroad, that takes me back to middle school. Yeah, when I first moved to the US was around middle school. Mainly what was the hardest thing to adapt for was the culture of the people surrounding you, like how they interact with each other. Because like how people joke with each other in, let's say, Latin America is much different to how they do so in the US. Like the jokes are different, the language is different. So like the context clues within the jokes themselves are also different. To me, that was the hardest thing since thankfully I had learned English prior to moving. So I was already fluent in English when I moved to the US. So it's mainly just like adapting to how people interacted around me.
And if I'm not wrong, you were before in Mexico or Colombia,
In
and
Colombia.
in Colombia now.
Mhm.
And like the teaching style or something like that, it's different between the two schools or how it changes?
This was something that my parents wanted to keep constant. So when I was in Colombia, I went to a British school. So when it came to like moving to the US, they were also looking for like the British system or like British system based schools. Um, just to like to keep my education constant. So in terms of like teaching styles, there isn't a difference since the curriculums were almost like identical.
The same, okay. And between like high school and college, like university, it's different, more, what changes for you?
For me, because I went to an IB diploma school, like the shift from high school to college was a lot easier than from what I hear from my peers. So, like for me personally, the first years of college were a lot easier than high school was, but I'm not the norm. Like the most common would be like having a difficult time like adapting to the teaching styles in college because college is more rigorous than your average public school.
What has been, like, what has it been like living with international roommates or students from different backgrounds, like in classes or like your surroundings, your group of friends?
Well, thankfully, I never really had terrible disputes with like roommates because if you ask other people, they're always gonna have like one terrible roommate or that like they didn't know how to clean like your living spaces or they just didn't clean after themselves. But like for me, thankfully, I had very like competent roommates in terms of like living on their own and like being independent on by themselves. As for like international roommates, I didn't really have like and okay, how do I say this? Like technically I was the international roommate, like for them. For me, it was mainly just like adapting, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And now you're living in a dorm or you are living at your house?
I'm living in an apartment off campus. So like universities will offer like dorms like in campus that are like close to whatever building for classrooms or like whatever department. But there's also off-campus housing, which would either be like um, renting like a house itself with a couple roommates. There'll be like apartment complexes off campus. So in my case, I'm living in an apartment complex off campus because it's cheaper than the dorms.
How did you deal with like homesickness, or did you not have any?
Oh, I definitely did. But like again, thankfully because my university wasn't that far of a drive from home, I could have driven home. Like I had the comfort of like knowing that I could drive home whenever weekend I wanted to. But if that wasn't the case, calling is calling my parents every now and then always helps.
So, like, do you say that your routine or activities that you do to help you feel at home, it's like call your parents, or did you do something else to feel like at home in this apartment?
It'd definitely be trying to implement whatever home routine I had back home, like back with my parents here. So, for example, like cleaning every weekend or like taking my shoes off before going into the apartment. And also just cooking meals from scratch that like I would have at home. Like that also helps.
And you are good at cooking?
I like to think so.
I know that you are very comfortable in English and like it's your second language, if I'm not wrong. But
Mhm.
do you face any difficulties studying in a different language in English? And how did you handle this? What advice would you give to students who don't feel confident in talking in English?
Personally, I for like higher education, I didn't have any troubles with like studying in English simply because out of how early I learned the language. Because I learned it before I even moved to the US. I learned it over in Colombia, which was back in like first, second grade. As for like any advice in general, would just be taking note of any keywords that you keep hearing constantly, and just keeping track of like any common phrases, any common words that you would hear in the classroom.
That's also what I do. Like I like to like watch series in English and to
Mhm.
see what like phrases they use in the United States. So like when I go there, I can seem to be like someone that it's that her nationality is United States. What advice would you give to students looking for scholarships or funding to study abroad?
What advice to give to people looking for scholarships online? Like online, there is a lot of scholarships, regardless of whether they are from the university themselves or if they're from, or if they're just like government given. There's external merit-based scholarships that you'll have to dig for and you'll have to apply for separately, but there's a lot of them out there. You just gotta put like the time and effort into them. As for like the essays required for those, more often than not, they'll reuse the same kind of like prompts. You can just like write your two, three, maybe four essays for like different prompts and just kind of like adjust them per like website, if that makes sense.
With your experience, what do you think universities want?
Who is capable of doing a lot of things at once. And I don't mean like do every club ever. No. I mean like if you're someone that has who is very passionate about a hobby outside of school and does a lot of work on it, put that in there. If you're someone who also like studies a lot and like does a lot of work within school or like philanthropy within school, put that in there. Like universities no longer only care about like grades. Like, yeah, grades are important. So like keep up with your grades. But if you're able to show that not only are you good with like education in terms of your grades and whatnot, but if you're able to show that not only are you good with like education in terms of your grades and whatnot, but you're also like capable like outside of academics, perfect. But you're also like capable like outside of academics, perfect.
And all of that career that you have, how much impact do it has in your applying education, applying university?
It did it did a solid amount, to be honest. Like outside of getting an athletic scholarship, which for the university I'm on, I did not get. It mainly just like showed my like the versatility of who I am as a person, since like I've had other like for the perfect example I can give, I've had an interview with the University of Pennsylvania, which is one of the Ivy Leagues, where they've expressed to me that they mainly took interest out of not only my grades, but out of how much time I took in like from academics to do athleticism. And basically they literally just told me that the only reason why they couldn't offer me a spot was because the graduating seniors did not graduate. Like I had a separate call after I got the rejection letter to tell me that.
Well, that's different. Um, it was difficult to balance practicing tennis and being good at school.
Um, More often than not, it was. Um, because obviously, like I was and still am very passionate about the sport. So like I took my time when it came to like one-on-one practices, like academy practices, like separate like condition like physical conditioning, which obviously like took time from school. But yes, there's limited hours in the day, but also if you set like a couple minutes aside from like the end of your day to just check up on your homework or like read up on whatever you need to read up, even if you don't finish all of it, having that start already helps because it's that little build up as you do like over the week.
Well, what tips do you have for writing essays, doing passion projects, or extracurricular activities?
For writing essays, the best I can give would be one, plan out what you want to write, like have your own little outline as to, okay, I want to say this here, this here, this here, and how you would transition into those things. And also, like, as you're writing, yeah, type out whatever like first comes to mind and then read it out loud to see like how that would be phrased and if you need to like check any grammar, punctuation. As for like passion projects, is mainly your own personal thing. So like however amount of time you put into it, it will show. Like it's just the amount of effort that you do for like your own separate passion projects. So like I can't really give you advice on that.
How did you make friends in a new country? It was difficult for you? Do you like went to this university with already friends, or did you start like at zero?
Oh no, I started at zero. It was hard because like especially for a big university like this is one of those universities that like you will go to class, you will pass by a round of like a lot of people whose faces you will never see again. Um, so making friends was initially really hard, and as cliche as it sounds, it is quite literally just a put yourself out there, being the one saying hi, even if it's to like the person sitting next to you in class, or if it's like the person sitting next to you on the school bus, or like I say school bus because like my university has like its own bus system of how big the
Well,
campus is.
yeah, like you need to have confidence when you're making friends. I
Mhm.
also do that here. And well, how do you stay connected with your family and friends back home?
Back home, so it would be like either like a couple messages like, "Hey, how you doing?" Like, um, any life updates or like blah blah blah. Like, when can you call? It's just like the little things that like really go a long way.
What was the most confusing or complicated part of like the visa or the bureaucratic process? Any tips of navigating that?
I'll be real honest on that one. I was far too young when that happened, or at least the
Yeah,
initial
yeah.
visa.
Okay.
Um, was mostly handled by my dad. He was the one who got like our lawyer, and our lawyer basically just like prepped us for the interviews that would happen for the permanent residency and for the citizenship. Because for the citizenship, you'd have to hold and also like taking a really short exam of like either US history, very US centric common sense questions. And once you pass that, you have your own like inauguration or like citizenship, like swearing in.
How do you study? What method or habits have helped you maintain your academic performance? It could be in university or even at high school, middle school.
Um, it mainly depends on the class I'm taking. For example, like I actually have an exam tomorrow. So like for that, I'm just like reading like the textbook and just like taking little notes from the textbook. Whereas for another exam I had a couple like last week was just like, oh, reading over the slides, doing like practice questions. So it is like for me in particular, it mainly like depends on the structure of the class, especially in college, because in college, the class structure will be entirely dependent on the professor. So depending on who you get as a professor, that's how you'll have to like cater your study habits.
What inspiring lesson have you learned so far in your academic year?
Honestly, it would probably be like the professors. Because like if I can tell that the professor actually knows like very well,
What advice would you give to someone thinking of study in an international school?
as cliche as it sounds, like to like do your best, organize yourself very well. As daunting as it may be, like the worst you can do is just stay holed up in your room and just like study or like just not do anything aside from academics. Have like a variety of experiences.
Well, and the final question is, if you could sit down for coffee with yourself before starting university, what advice would you give?
To do more, to like try new things. Um, because for example, um, here in here there's like a lot of what they call student organizations, which are basically like clubs. And there is so many of them, from like educative ones to like career-based ones to just like for fun, or maybe even just like small societies for like people within a specific ethnicity or race, like or even a community. Um, so to try out literally anything that's new that you think it'd be interesting. So like for example, not this semester, last semester, I started dancing for fun. Just why not? And I actually really enjoy it.
Yeah, I know that you are now like taking salsa classes, I think.
Yeah.
I think that like little things that you do to enjoy life and to like be yourself are good. And like do these things, dancing or playing tennis, it helps you to balance like the the stress that you have in at university or
Oh, of course. Because um like for me personally, any sort of like physical activity, whether it be like going to the gym, going on a run, doing like any sort of like exercise or like playing a sport, um, really really sets a specific break from whenever I'm stuck doing a homework, or if I'm like or like if I'm studying for a really long time for a really heavy exam, to just come back fresh and just have like new thoughts.
that's all for the podcast. Thank you so much to being here.
Of course,
And
thank you.